What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the studio. Today we are going to be using a smooth-on product to make some awesome molds of some clay items that I have already created. As you can see in the highlight clip there, we are working with Futhark Runes. Of course, I've had those on my Etsy shop for sale for a very long time. And originally I had those listed as like finger knuckle bone runes, but they're not really that. They're more like finger bone runes. And that's what I have them labeled as now. Eventually I may make some actual knuckle bone runes too if they become popular or somebody requests them. But for now, these are finger bone runes. Now, Futhark runes have shown up throughout history in different cultures throughout the world, and you can find all sorts of the different descriptions and meanings for those rune symbols on YouTube and on Google as well. So make sure you look that up on your own later. I'll post one or two of my favorite websites that kind of reference the meanings of those runes in the description below. Now, in more recent history, they're more notable in the movie Stardust. I used to love that movie when I was younger, and it's still a great movie to watch if you haven't seen it. It's called Stardust. In that movie, they're using those runes to kind of gauge in the journey or the plot line whether or not they should do something. Yes or no questions, and it kind of gives them a guide on where they should go to gain access or find the star, right? So definitely check out that movie and it kind of makes sense along the way. But like I said, Futhark runes throughout history, cultures, everywhere, all over the world, you can check it out. So I've sculpted these quite a few times, and I'm at the point now where it's just logical for me to go ahead and start casting these. That way I can save time. I can also probably lower the overall price point of the items, make them a little bit stronger, and then I can quickly just cast them, detail like them with the Dremel tool, clean them up a little bit, and then immediately go into the detail painting, which is different for all the customers. So that I paint them any different ways, whether it's like a wooden texture with mossy oak coverings, or I do like a gold inlay, or make them blood runes, or like a waterfall, like a watercolor effect, something like that. All sorts of options. So I've already started this process now here. As you can see here, and you may have saw it in the thumbnail as well, I've already kind of put these into a Tupperware container here. Now, I've been thinking about doing this for a while. Now, a lot of times when people will make molds of particular items, they'll put a sprue on the very top. Now, you can do that, and a sprue is just basically like a casted like wax funnel that attaches to your item, and it comes up, and then you pour your medium that you're using to cast with into that hole, and it kind of just makes it go down into the void in the mold. I've used that method a few times in the past before, but we're just going to try something just super simple, super fast and easy today, because I'm casting so many of them and I want to make a one-piece or two-piece mold of all of these runes. I want to keep them together. So what I've gone out of my way, I've got quite a few of these flat bottom, note that, flat bottom plastic Tupperware containers. I had got a few from Walmart. They were okay, but I actually got these at IKEA. And I will link that item in the description below, as well as a equivalent on Amazon affiliate list as well. So if you want to check that out, you can find that under the mold casting and making process playlist on my Amazon affiliate. So I've made these, right? Or I got these, right? So I've go ahead and sculpted all of my runes, and I have two more to sculpt because I forgot to. Shame on me. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to apply just a little dollop of hot glue to the corner, and I'm going to go ahead and put that into place, and I'm putting them at angles so that way when the bottom, which is the open side of the molds, is exposed, I have a nice little pour spout with the shape of the actual hot glue. I'll do a little bit of trim work on each corner when I cast those with the Dremel tool. But that also allows me to inspect each one for perfection before we move on to the painting process. And if I need to recast any of them, then I will do so. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to break out the hot glue gun, we're going to warm it up, and we're going to go ahead and put this last rune into position before we begin the actual mold making process. Okay, so while the hot glue gun is warming up here, let's just talk about what kind of like actual silicone we're going to be using. So today we're going to be using a smooth-on Moldstar15 Slow Platinum silicone rubber 1:1 mixed ratio or by weight. We will probably do just by weight, and then that way I can also gauge just how much it took to fill up the container for the items we're casting. Now, I've used this item quite a bit in the past, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Anything that Smooth-On makes is grade A amazing. So I've used Moldstar15 Slow to make the Goliath Bird Eater Tarantula Spider Legs. That was a massive mold. and it is also in a Tupperware container. You can check out that video under that playlist. But we're going to use this to create these molds. So Moldstar15 Slow from Smooth On, absolute amazing brand, and you can find a lot of their items that I use or have already used in my affiliate list below for Amazon. You can check out some of their items. Great pricing, and I'll usually just order it from Amazon. And little sample kits, because usually, unless you're getting into mass production, you really don't need a whole lot of these. So the sample sizes they offer are absolutely great. I wish they would offer just a size between sample and like the gallon, something in between that's relatively well priced. But otherwise, it's pretty good. All right, guys. So Smooth On products, the way to go. Alrighty guys, let's jump into this video here. Now, as I stated before, we're going to get this hot glue gun warming up here. And as you can see, I've got most of the runes already placed into position here with the hot glue. And we're going to go ahead and place the last few. Now, a moment ago in the pre-video, the intro there, we had already placed all of these except for maybe one or two. I actually rearranged them so that way the original runes from the movie Stardust are actually in the very first line of these. So that way I can keep track of it, because I offer this in like a 4-pack, a 10-pack, and then a like a 24 or 25 pack. And then of course prices vary, and then the customer can get them painted however they want. But I just want to make sure that those first 4 sets are easy to go ahead and cast without me having to look into each one. Because it could be like, months later on down the road, and I want to make sure that I have the right one that I'm casting for the set that I'm making. So the very first 4 on that first row will be the original set from Stardust there. So this glue that we're using here is just clear Gorilla hot glue. It is actually pretty good overall. My wife purchased this, and I've kind of taken the little hot glue gun over, so I actually tend to use it a little bit more than she does. But the Gorilla glue is working very well. Now, it does take a little bit of pressure sometimes to get that hot glue off of the Tupperware container, because it does adhere quite well. But it's really stout overall. So here's what it looks like now with it completely finished out. And you can see the little hot glue dollops at the bottom of each individual rune. The great thing about this is I was able to kind of cast these so that it sits on the corner of the finger bone. So that is the funnel for the actual resin to go down into. And I'll be able to go ahead and cast those and then just chop off that little excess with the Dremel tool, which is really easy to do so. So the mold kit that we're using is a Moldstar15 Slow. I love 15 Slow. Smooth On, you're doing the right thing with these kits. I love them and everything in every way. I hope to eventually start to upgrade as the monetary funds come in for these magnet projects, and I'm going to start to upgrade into larger quantities of this. I really love it. It has no smell to it. It's not stinky or bad for you in any way. I'm not saying don't ventilate the room. You can do that, but it's just really easy to use these little kits. So if you're just getting into it, do not be intimidated by this. You can find all sorts of reference videos out there, but I'm also going to show you the ways that you can begin with this right now. Now, of course, we're going to make a lot of these videos moving forward. So in the very first few videos like this, we'll kind of run through a lot of different ways that you can kind of pour these and mix them out. But in the long run, usually what I'll do is I'll just mix by weight in the same containers. That way you don't lose any of that material as you transition from cup to cup. We will be using some disposable cups in this. So I have a few small and then just regular solo cups there. You can get it as a Dollar Tree or Dollar General. For $1 for a whole like 15 to 20 pack, and they last you, they last you a little while. Now, I like these cups because they have little gauges and rings on them, and you can kind of get a perfect measure of part A, part B for your mold, or whether it's your casting, mediums, or anything you want. And it allows you to go ahead and just pour that up to the line that you want, because it is a 1-by-1 mixture. You can, of course, shake up the bottle if you'd like to. I usually don't do that, though, but I know I probably should. But I just go ahead and pour in the quantities into a separate cup. Now, the method we're using here is we've poured both A and B into their own individual measuring cups here. However much you want to do, just make sure you have enough room in the pour cup that you don't overflow it, of course. And we're going to do multiple pours with this kit. So, pour however much you want. And then make your pour, and then you do the next layer. I do not like to wait too long between pours, so that way that it has a lot of time to like cure up. I mean, your silicone will like attach to silicone, but sometimes you'll see a seam line, and I just really don't want to see that seam line on my molds. I want them to be very uniform and very clean looking. But we're going to go ahead and mix this up here. Now, of course, because we did pour these individually into their own cups, A and B, before we poured them into this one, of course, you do lose a little bit of material there. So although I do show you this method, and once in a while I'll do this, especially if I'm not really I want to measure it out, but I'm not going to pour them and mix them right away. I could be, waiting 20, 30 minutes before I mix this up, before I'm ready to pour, while I'm doing other things in the studio prepping. And I want that to be to be ready to go, measured out, but not actually workable. Alrighty, so we're gonna go ahead and pour this here now. Now, usually you don't have to be super detailed, guys. I know that you can be a purist and you have to pour it a certain way at a certain height and do all this stuff. And but like you don't have to be that way, guys. You really just don't. It's really a fun process, and as long as you don't mix up your A and B and pour the wrong quantities and create like a bad mix or a pour, then you can't go wrong. So don't overthink this. Like, people are so intimidated by making silicone molds of their items so they can reproduce them. Do not be intimidated by this process, guys. I'll admit I was that way originally too, until I started getting into mold making. But just go with it. Just try it out. Have some fun. Start off small if you want to, making just one mold of one thing that you've made, and then just go from there. Using the hot glue technique that we're using here, and we will be using this again in the future for more of these mold making videos. So you'll be able to see it over and over again. It is very easy for you to make your molds. Now, the reason I do like pouring it into the cup here and then pouring it out is you get that residue inside the cup. Now, sometimes I'll take that and I'll drizzle it over the tops of each individual item that we're casting here, or molding, as it were. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to take this paintbrush. This is a throwaway paintbrush, and I'm going to go ahead and take that, and I'm going to take any of that extra, and I'm kind of pushing it with the paint bristles into all the nooks and crannies of the bone texture. So a lot of the bone fingers have a lot of striations and pits and divots and stuff, and the silicone will hold all of those shapes. But if you just pour it immediately, a lot of times you'll get air pockets within the silicone mold. And we're not degassing these. You can degas it when you get more advanced, and we may do that later on down the road for you guys, but for right now, this is what we have to work with. So I'm just using that, and I'm just taking all that excess there. I'm just kind of cascading it over the tops of each individual rune, let it drip down, and then we're just making sure that we kind of rotate the Tupperware container around and push that all that silicone into the nooks and crannies here. Once it's in the nooks and crannies, you can kind of just let it go. A little bit of it's going to drip down, but it is caked on there, and you can kind of see where you've missed spots here and there. And the whole goal is to make sure you push all the air out of any recesses, so that way there's no air pockets or divots in your casted items when you go to make these. There's nothing worse than having like a hair pocket in the worst place, and you just never can keep that item looking good. You always have to do it back and make a filler, or use a clay to kind of fill in any pockets or air bubbles after you cast, and you just don't want to have to contend with that. So even now, like the first layer that we poured is just really workable. It's very easy to work with, and we're using that as just a brush on. Now, Smooth On does make a lot of different silicones that you can use, and some of them are labeled brush on, some of them are not labeled that way, but I do make a brush on layer on all my detailed pieces of artwork. Now, I'll come back to that in a moment, but let me go ahead and shift conversation here to what we're doing now. Is I'm measuring by weight. Now, I am using the 2-cup method, as I stated before. That way, you can kind of measure them out, set them off to the side. You don't have to worry about them, but they're not actually mixed together to start the activation process for the actual mold to start setting up. So you could go ahead and use the 2-cup process and still measure by weight instead of measuring by quantity. As you can see, these cups specifically have just a strange design on the outside. They don't have that like line on the outside like the smaller ones did, and it makes it harder to measure by overall quantity. But when you measure by weight, you really don't have to worry about that. As long as they measure out the same, then you're good to go. So oftentimes I will measure by weight. Now, like I said, we're using the two-cup method, so you can set these off to the side for 30, 40 minutes. Make sure there's no dust settling in it, or any kind of wood shavings or anything like that. But they're sitting off to the side now for at least 10 minutes or so. And we're going to go ahead and pour these into a larger Tupperware container. I don't have any disposable cups that were big enough for this pour here. And this is the main pour over the item, and then I actually come up short again. But as you can see here, so all this scraping that I'm having to do, I'm wasting materials, right? So like this is just wasted materials that I can never get every drop out of this container. And when I try to like really strain and push the silicone to go as far as I can, so my goal is to make each of the containers one individual mold for each Tupperware container. And it doesn't really work out that way all the time, but that's what I'm shooting for, right? So as I'm mixing this up here, we're being very deliberate to make sure we mix up all of the white. You want to make sure all the white and the darker blue is absolutely decimated and just mixed together. If there's any kind of unmixed areas, then you'll get like a pasty white texture, and you can get pitting inside your silicone mold. It's not the end of the world, but if that pitting is on the wrong area, like inside against a rune or a casted item, it can cause bad casts later on down the road. So I was able to get that mold or that pour completely poured onto the mold here, and now we're going to go ahead and pour the second one. Now this is the second pour after the brush on, right? So third overall pour. And the reason I have to do this because I just came up short, guys. I don't really measure by mass how much I need to cover all these items because they're just so intricate. But here we are. We have the mold completely poured out. It used one entire test set here, like a trial set. And I really do like these just because they're just the absolute perfect quantity at times. Sometimes I wish they were a little bit larger, even if it's just like a few ounces, but it's pretty good overall. Now what we're going to do here now is we're going to use a little bit of elbow grease here, and we're going to remove this mold from the Tupperware container. And then what we'll do is we'll remove all the hot glue from the items as well as the actual Tupperware container itself. You could use the hot glue to stay in the Tupperware container and just use it as like a mold where it tells you where and how the mold went into the Tupperware container originally. But I just really don't find a need for that because the bottom of the mold is just designed so well to stay at home in this Tupperware container. It doesn't matter which way it's turned as long as it's in there. Look at all these little pits and holes for all these runes. Talk about trypophobia, right? Anybody out there that's experienced trypophobia, I do apologize for this. It might get worse before it gets better. But look how smooth that is. Now, the reason I mentioned that I had you need to make sure it mixes up perfectly is because I had a little itty bitty dollop right there in the bottom of the mold that is just ill mixed and it did not set up properly. I just went ahead and wiped that away, and it's really not going to hurt my mold in any way. But imagine that being up against the inside of a rune or up against like an expensive like $400 or $500 sculpture, and then it always has a pit, and you just don't want that. Trypophobia. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and pull these apart here. You want to stretch out your silicone mold and create a little bit of unseating against the actual clay items here that we had sculpted. And we're going to go ahead and begin dissecting these from the actual silicone mold here. Now, the easiest way is to go ahead and slice a relief slice. I'm going to do rows here, not columns. I'm going to do rows. And we're going to use a brand new razor blade here. Now, of course, I have used this razor blade bar before. I got it in a kit. I can't remember what I got it with. It may have been my 3D printer. But I used that one time to make the slices on the Goliath bird ear tarantula mold, and I ended up even if I was holding it on the non-blade side, I ended up slicing my fingers up, man. Like, and I mean, like, it was one of those things like, I looked down at my finger and I was like, slice. Well, okay, keep going. Slice, slice, slice. And I had like a Chex Mix slices all over my fingers. Like, it wasn't to the bone or anything, and I really do have very tough hands. But I just really would not recommend the bar unless you're just really truly advanced. I don't recommend that because I don't want you out there slicing your fingers up like I did, because you want to get some really deep, nice, clean cuts. And the only reason I use that at all is because the X-Acto knife just was not deep enough to get the cut lines that I needed for the Goliath legs, because those legs are like 6 or 7 inches long in total. And this little X-Acto knife right here just didn't cut it. But this will work for these shallow molds like it is here. So we're going to go ahead and cut a shallow relief cut here in between each individual mold. You'll get a little bit of feeling a cast in between those sometimes, but that's no problem at all. It'll pull right out when you pull the casted items out of their individual pockets here. So we're just going to go along the entire length of the rows here, and we're just going to go ahead and relief cast, cut them all the way down. and I'm just using some pliers to pull it out here, wiggle it back and forth, and then pop, there goes the weasel, or the rune. And then we'll go ahead and set that off to the side. Now this will allow me to quickly make all 25 to 27 Futhark runes in total. And there's my originals. I actually keep these in a plastic baggie, so if I ever need to recast these items, I can do so. I did have a little bit of breakage on maybe one or two of them, but otherwise they pulled completely out of the mold extremely easily. The trypophobia doesn't hit as hard when the runes aren't just poking out of those holes, right? But otherwise, it's a pretty easy process overall, and I hope you guys enjoyed the overall 2-cup method. In the next video, we'll probably just measure by weight. That way I'm not wasting the materials between 2 cups into the one and then pouring into the actual item itself. What do you think, guys? And just like that, guys, this awesome mold is fully completed. Now, this thing was a blast to make. Not only was it very intricate, the fact that we were actually making molds of almost 26 to 27 separate individual pieces, but we were able to make those out of one piece of silicone mold. And it's very impressive. It's almost as impressive as when I made the Goliath Bird Eater Tarantula legs, where I casted all 8 legs plus 2 fangs out of one individual mold. Now you can check that out on this playlist as well if you want to check that out under the molding and casting playlist. Very cool. But this thing turned out absolutely great. I've already casted probably about 2 or 3 sets already in like 2 or 3 days. So the overall process for making those runes is greatly expedited. Now just remember that each individual item, although I'm not hand sculpting them individually anymore, they are for my own original sculpted items. So I hand sculpted them and then I molded them. So it's not like I'm taking somebody else's materials or items and I'm casting them and then just reproducing them myself. No, these are things that I sculpted and I've made, and that's the only things that I will cast and sell or resell on my channel. So the benefit of this is the customers will be able to get the same overall design every single time, but then the paint process will vary depending on what painting process they would choose to do. I'm also going to start offering these in both spray paint and UV resin. The UV resin just giving it a really like very thick clear coat over it to give it a lot of extra protection, but not everybody wants that really cakey like clear coat feel to it. Some people just like it to feel very kind of like matte textured. So in those situations, I am going to go ahead and split this off so that I offered spray paint and then a UV resin coating on them as well. And of course, individual people can ask for different paint jobs. Right now, I think I have 2 or 3 for aged bone, and then I have, I think, 1 for like a mossy oak with like a green flocking type of texture for like a D&D player. So they're just very cool. I've been making them for around 2 or 3 years now, and they're really picking up in popularity, and I really do enjoy making them. There's some people who out there who try to compete with me in this space for a while, but it's hard to do so because I just keep the price very low on these items, so that way people can just they can enjoy them. Just a quick, easy item to order on a few pennies, and then they get a really great quality item from the studio. And I really enjoy making them. They're just very enjoyable. Most of the funds that I get for these immediately go into me making different sculpted items here in the studio. I reinvest most of the monies that I make selling art, reinvest it into the studio, as you can see. So it's just really beneficial. So if you do want to buy something from my Etsy shop, just remember you're fueling more art here on my YouTube as well as my Etsy channel, and of course you could get a pretty cool piece of artwork. If you want to check out my Etsy shop, it's in the description below. And if you want any kind of prints for paintings, then you can go to pictorum.com. I'm looking to grow that portfolio over the next year or two, so looking forward to that. At the very end of this video, I just would like to notate that I am very impressed with the Smooth On products that I use. Over the last few weeks, instead of getting Bright White, Smooth On Smoothcast 300, I got 320. And that is the off-white. I'm really impressed with it. It's barely off-white at all. I mean, but compared to the bright white, it is a difference. And it's just one less layer that I have to put on to the actual item to get just a really nice bone or like a texture on it. We use Smooth On Moldstar15 Slow to make the mold, and then we use Smooth On Smoothcast 320 to make the actual castings. And that's probably what I'll use a lot of time moving forward. But of course, we're going to get into some really big pieces of art here in the near future as the monetary finances grow for the studio. So you never know what you might find here in the studio or here on my YouTube channel. If this is the type of thing that you enjoy watching, or you're looking to get into casting and mold making on your own, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of artists out there that do create similar items with casting and mold making processes, but I really do like the hot glue creation technique of just gluing it to the actual Tupperware container and just using that as your sprue pour spout. But of course we are going for a very nice kind of smooth texture, and we do have to do a little bit of trimming on the top of each individual item, but that's absolutely no problem at all. A little bit of Dremel work here and there is no big deal. And just like that, guys, I'll see you on the next awesome video here in the studio. Later, guys.